Today on Fortnite, I got second place. I was so close.
Mom, will you get me a snack?
Mom!
It's time for adult conversation. With me, your host, Brandy Ferner. Hello, Adult Conversation Podcast listeners, and welcome to another spontaneous episode brought to you by the coronavirus. TM ding. You might hear kids and a husband in the background and a lot more ums than normal. But it is what it is. So today I felt like perhaps I could share some of the best anxiety-fighting tools I've learned along the way while dealing with my chronic health stuff and the anxiety that comes from that. All of my main tools are applicable for the crisis we're in now, and one of them is specifically life-changing. I know I say that all the time, but this stuff really is. It completely changed how I respond to anxiety, and we'll get to it in a minute, and I will walk you through the entire thing. There's a process that has 4 steps. It's very clear. It's something I have written in my phone on a notepad so that whenever I'm having a moment of panic, I can go back to it. It's so delicious. But just so you know, this episode is meant to validate, uplift, and educate you, along with finding maybe some humor in the anxiety. So if you're feeling pretty exhausted by all the news and worry, my intention here isn't to add to that. In fact, it's to help you get relief from that. So there will be no fear-mongering here, but nor will there be complete and utter denial. And also, I actually have a bit of optimism at the end. Yes, I know, me and optimism. You will be shocked. Oh, and a quick shout out to Christine Giordano, my newest Patreon peep. The email I received when you signed up so brightened my day. In a time when everything feels like it's on fire and there's so much financial unknown, here came this person who was willing to support me. So thank you for that, Christine. If you want to join Christine and others in making this podcast possible and in making me smile, go to www.patreon.com/adultconversation. That's patreon.com/adultconversation. It's basically $4 or $8 a month to help me out. That's less than a roll of toilet paper on the black market right now. Also, damn you toilet paper hoarders. So speaking of fear-mongering versus utter denial, it seems like there's this spectrum and we're all on it somewhere. And right on one side is people who are terrified, fear-mongering, and on the other side is just complete and utter denial. And it feels to me like it's a little bit challenging to talk to people outside of the group that you currently are in. So if you're somebody who's, maybe in the middle or somewhere middle towards fear-mongering, seems like you can't have conversation with people who are closer to the utter and complete denial side. It's this interesting thing that I'm finding out, and even in people who are in the same mindset where you're at, like how seriously you're taking this. My last episode, I went into my inability to believe how people aren't taking it seriously. So I'm not going to make this episode about that. But even within people who are like-minded and in the same place mentally, even within that, there's a little bit of like walking on eggshells because we all have our limit for how much we can talk about this stuff. And so you may even have friends that are like-minded to you, and in certain moments, they can hear the latest news and they want to talk to you about it. And in other moments, they don't want to. And even not even friends, but, relationships inside your home, like your spouse or your partner, that's also the same thing. I know that I've had a couple nights where I'm making dinner and my husband will be looking at his phone and like say to me, what's the worst thing about this whole thing? And I look at him and I'm like, no. And I cannot hear it right now. I literally cannot hear the bad news you're about to tell me. And so I think it's important that we know where our limits are. And be able to say to people close to us in our life, like, I can't take that right now, and it's nothing personal. It's just I'm not there. Because maybe in the next hour you are there. So it's this real like up and down roller coaster feeling that I think a lot of us are on, where we're in and out of feeling okay about it. And then we have moments of not feeling okay about it, or lots of moments of not feeling okay about it. But I am finding that it's hard to have real conversations with people who aren't in the same headspace. And that can be a little bit off-putting because there can be people who are part of your support system who are like this. And so where you normally find support, you now find silence because you can't even really have a conversation because people are trying to prove their way is right or your way is wrong, whether passive aggressively or actually. So I think that that's a tricky time. So I just want to validate for that for people. If you're feeling like that, I'm feeling like that too. And I'm really trying to do my best to give people the benefit of the doubt during this time. So, we're all kind of freaking out in our own little ways. And so if you have people in your life who maybe aren't being their best version of themselves, I think this is a good time to not take things personally and let them go and understand that we're all dealing with this in our own way. And the last thing any of us need is any more stress added to what we're already dealing with. And I know that's easier said than done. I found myself in a situation like that yesterday, and it wasn't easy, but it's like I feel like we all need a little bit of breathing room. So, which is funny because we're in quarantine, so we have breathing room, but I just mean emotionally and just some space to give people the benefit of the doubt. We're all going to be making wrong choices, non-compassionate choices, along with all the right choices and the compassionate choices we're making. So maybe just a little bit of gentleness for all of us. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to say about anxiety is that I think we need to expect that anxiety is going to be here. I think a lot of us are fighting it and don't want to be feeling anxious, which is just so understandable. I don't want to feel like this. I know all of you don't want to feel like this, wherever on the spectrum you are for this, but we are going to be having some anxiety. So I think that is a good first step, because it's and you'll learn as I'm going to tell you about this program that I think is really, really helpful, or this 4-step plan, is the resistance to the anxiety can actually be worse than the anxiety itself, or at least a big piece of it. So I think we have to know, it actually makes sense that we have anxiety right now. It doesn't mean we like it or we feel good about it. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how to mitigate some of the fear around the fear. But it's not weird that we're anxious. So that's number one. Just because you have anxious feelings doesn't mean that you have diagnosed anxiety. So we're going to have some anxiety here, is all I'm meaning to say. And there's also going to be a lot of what ifs. Like, we're all going through that in our head. And again, we're going to talk about how to temper those. But weirdly enough, some of this anxiety and some of this fear actually serves us. And this is something that I used to teach in the birth work that I did, which is the same with birth. I know that there's an idea out there of, you birth with no fear, fearless birth. But it's not realistic. And sometimes the things that we're scared of actually make us act in a way that supports us. And so I think the same thing is here. It applies in this situation, which is our fear about some of what's happening is what's causing us to pull back and self-quarantine and to take care of others. That fear is actually motivating us to do something positive. So I think this being fearful of fear thing that we all are likely feeling some version of, I think we can let a little bit of that go. And so this is where it becomes tricky, because we have to figure out, well, which fear is a welcome fear and which fear is a pointless, annoying, I wish it would stop fear. Like, which fears have a purpose and which don't? I don't know the answer to that, but we're going to try to work through it in just a little bit. But I just wanted to mention that part. So personally, the first couple days of this, I was looking at the bright spots of it, and it wasn't quite as bad. And now I think I hit a wall like day 3 or 4, which is just wild thinking about how long this could possibly go on. But I find myself sometimes, like I said, feeling okay about things, and then other times not feeling okay about things. Sometimes I'm angry about the situation, and then other times I'm accepting of it. And so I think this roller coaster way, even within the same hour, I think is quite understandable. It reminds me a little bit of having a newborn, and you have all of those different moments, within an hour, within the day, the highs, the lows. In some ways, I think us moms are quite prepared for this, even though because we're bearing the burden of a lot of this with having to do the extra childcare and make meals from home and all these things and these gender norms that we just fall right into without asking for equal help. I do think that we have been through isolation before, most of us with newborns, at least for a certain amount of time. And we also know what it's like to have the normalcy of our lives completely changed and go from living one way to then have to strategize and change everything around this new little person. So a pandemic is not as fun as a new little person, but I think that we actually have some skills here. One of the things that's been happening to me, and I had posted about it, I think even about a week and a half ago, is the shortness of breath, which is terrifying because it's one of the symptoms of the coronavirus. But I have nothing other than just like stress, shortness of breath. And I can feel it when I'm reading the news and I'm scrolling on my phone. I can feel it where it just feels like a tightness in my chest. But then it's this messed up thing where it's like, well, what if this is the beginning of that? Which then gives you a tighter chest and more stress. And then your mind starts spinning and going to all these places. So the shortness of breath thing is like just an awful rabbit hole. And I know that we've all gone down them and are going down them. You know, I think everybody has felt a tickle in their throat at some point and been like, oh shit, is this the beginning? And then you fixate on it, and then you have anxiety, and what symptoms of that are the same as the coronavirus. It's like that part is maddening. So just know if you're there, you are not alone. I'm also doing this thing where, so I have Xanax. I got a prescription for it for like acute SOS moments, I think maybe 2 years ago, and I'm still working through it, I think, and I take them a half at a time. So I still have like nearly a lot of the bottle left, but I'm rationing them. And even though I do feel like my nervous system is definitely on overdrive, I think all of ours are on overdrive, I'm playing this game where I'm like, is now when I take one? Or what if there's worse things to come and then I need them more, but I don't have them because we can't go out and get them and I'd have to go to a doctor and get a refill. So it's this funny Xanax game where I'm like, is this the time to take it? No, it's not the apocalypse yet, you know. So it's fun playing the Xanax game. So if you're there, if you're playing that game, I'm also playing that game. Memes, thank God for memes. Memes are keeping me alive right now. But again, it's this thing where there's a group of people in my life that we're sending each other these memes that are a little bit dark all the time. And then I think there's another group of friends I have that aren't in that headspace. So again, it's this trying to figure out, like, are we laughing about any of this? Or are we still pretending it's not happening? Or where is everybody? And trying to be respectful of where people are and not just pulling them in where you are, you know. It's a bit of a challenge, I'll have to say. But thank God for memes. The scrolling that I mentioned earlier, I know a lot of us are stuck doing it, and I find myself scrolling on my phone to just see what's the latest, what are people saying, and I can feel myself wanting to stop, and I can't stop. It's this crazy thing. I finally have to just like break the pattern, and then once I do, it's so wonderful. So I recommend, I mean, not that anybody needs me to tell them this, we all feel it, I'm sure, which is to take these breaks from social media. I'm always happier when I do. The downside is there's so much connection on social media that we aren't having in real life right now. So that does really fit that and fill that need for me, I know. So I'm being more cognizant of not scrolling before bed because I don't want to end the day with all that stuff. Like last night, actually, my husband and I found TikTok. I know this is like, I'm such an old person by just saying like, we found the newfangled TikTok that's probably been around forever. It's hilarious. Oh my God. It was so funny. And it was such a fun way. We were just watching these random people are funny out there. They was watching the most random funny shit on there. And it was so much better than looking as the numbers doubled again today and all of that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend that. I highly recommend maybe not starting the morning that way, although I know we're all kind of doing the like, okay, what's the damage report in the morning? But I'm sure you guys have figured this out yourselves too, that being on social media can give you some things, but that it can also add to the terror. So if you're scrolling on your phone endlessly, so am I. Okay, let's dive into the main tool here, because I really think this is going to help a lot of people. I posted about this on my Adult Conversation Facebook page the other day because this is based on a book called Dare, The New Way to End Anxiety and Stop Panic Attacks by Barry McDonagh. And I think he had it was last weekend, and he had it for, I think it was free as an ebook for like 2 days. So I know a couple of you got it and messaged me and said that you thought it was so helpful, which I was just thrilled about, that it could help anybody. So I thought what I would do today is go through this step that he outlines in here. And, and a part of me was like, doing an episode that's based on somebody else's work. Like, I don't want to take somebody else's work, but I feel okay about it because I'm telling you what the book is. Hopefully many of you will buy it, because the little bite from it that I'm going to give you is just, like I said, like the SOS. Here it is, just in its most basic format. And the book itself goes through so much that I loved reading when I needed to read it a couple years ago. So I'm urging everybody to get this book. I think it's also on audiobook. There's also an app, which I have and is great and can talk you down from panic attacks. And there is also, he hosts so many groups, and they're specific based on what your anxiety is about. And if you go to dareresponse.com, you'll find that he even has YouTube videos, even about I just listened to the latest one about the coronavirus and how people are handling it. So there are tons of resources, and I want to point you in that direction. So my intention here is not that I'm taking this information as my own, because I'm admitting to you that this is not my own information, but I am going to tell you how I've used it in my life and how I look at it. But I'm hoping that I'm giving a huge shout out to Dare and anybody who needs it. I mean, ultimately, I want to help people who are having a hard time during this crisis. And I think Barry is of the same mindset, which is why he had it for free. So moving forward, this way of handling anxiety is different than probably everything you've ever heard about doing it. And that's why I found it so effective. I've always tried to come back to the present moment, breathe, tell myself everything's okay. And not to say that those things don't work for people or aren't good to do, but this, I really bought into this, and therefore it worked for me. And again, part of that is because I read all the lead up to it. So maybe what I'm going to tell you today, these steps, you might be like, I don't really understand how they work and why. If you read his book, you will. But I'm hopeful that I can give you enough explanation that you will at least get the basics of it. So the entire idea here is to have a radically new relationship with your anxiety. It's okay to feel anxiety. Of course, we're going to feel it during a worldwide pandemic. And the idea here is to not fight yourself on it. And of course, our inner alarms are going off about this whole thing. So it makes sense that we are having these anxious thoughts. So like we talked about in the beginning, there's a difference between and figuring out what things fall into what category is a little bit of a challenge. But there are differences between some of our fear that will animate better choices that keep us safer. And then there's also the what if spiral. So this is really for the what if spiral, because we're all dealing with very real things right now. And so it's not to say that like those you can just sort of dare away. That's the acronym here. So this is for when we're in the spiral, which I think a lot of us are in and out of constantly during this time. Okay. So the acronym here is DARE. There's 4 steps, DARE. The first one is diffuse. So, and in his book, he goes into this in such great detail. And actually, the book isn't even that long. It's such like a bite-sized read, but it's wonderful. So Barry says, the author, anxiety is nothing more than nervous energy in your body. This first step is your first point of contact with anxiety, and it's very quick and easy to implement. One of the biggest mistakes we make with anxiety is that we get caught up in the what-if thoughts. What if my heart doesn't stop pounding? What if I have a panic attack? What if I faint? What if I can't breathe? What if kids don't go back to school for 6 months? What if we run out of Doritos, right? So what Barry's suggesting is, in order to diffuse this anxiety from the get-go, is you respond to it with saying, so what? And I know that sounds like, well, that's like, really, we're just going to say, so what? But hear me out. It's part of a process. So when the thought comes out, what if my kids don't go back to school for 6 months? You start to get comfortable the more that you do this, of just the so what is so that your body knows, oh, this is one of those thoughts. And I'm not giving any energy to it. So what? And so you can talk yourself if you need to go further with it. So let's say somebody was worried, what if my heart doesn't stop pounding? You say, so what? My heart's an incredibly strong muscle. What if I have a panic attack? So what? I'll get through it like I do all the panic attacks. What if I faint? So what? Somebody will help me out. What if my kids don't go back to school for 6 months? So what? I will take it a day at a time. What if we run out of Doritos? That you can't really say so what to, because it's just awful. It's an awful, awful future that I don't want to live in. Of course, there's a way to so what. Actually, that's probably the most so what of them, but yet not. Okay, so anyway, the idea here is you say, so what? And you can say whatever you want. You can say, I don't give a fuck. You can say whatever. It's whatever feels right to you. And it doesn't matter if you fully believe in your own response to these questions. The key point here, Barry says, is to quickly diffuse the buildup of fear by answering the what ifs with so what, because it neutralizes the fear and places you back into a position of power. So what you'll realize that's happening here is we're trying to undo the stress response system. And it's almost like we're trying to trick it so that it calms itself down. So the first thing is to diffuse. So just having this little thing of, oh, so what? So what if that thing happens? Because a lot of what we're worried about is future thinking, and it hasn't happened. And right, there's a very real fear that some of this could happen, but that's like anything in life. There's so many things that we think, what if somebody gets in a car accident? What if I get fired from my job? We have that future thinking so much that there's a lot of this current pandemic that falls into that. So to realize it and to be able to say, so what about it? Barry also says that diffusing this quickly disarms the buildup of tension, and it gets you moving in the same direction as your nervous system arousal instead of resisting it. And that resistance is where it's a cycle, where it gets even worse, and it builds on top of the first layer of anxiety. And well, now you've got a second layer because you're trying to run from it. So first we just do the immediate diffusing. So once we've diffused it, we now need to discharge the anxiety even further. So the second step is to allow it, which I know you're like, this sounds insane. Why are we allowing these thoughts? Okay, but just hear me out again. Barry says that once you've started to respond to anxiety in the right way, it's crucial you keep going by releasing all the resistance so that any anxiety that's still present can dissipate even faster. And you do this by accepting the anxiety that you feel and allowing it to manifest in whatever way it wishes. So here's the spot where when I would get panicky about what my body, mostly my digestive system, was doing, like after I ate something or if I was in a big group and there weren't bathrooms around, that's usually where my stuff goes to. This was the section, and it was so helpful because I'd feel the panic coming on and I'd feel the fear, and then I'd be scared of the fear. So, right, with this 4-step process, I would say, so what? So what if my stomach doesn't feel right? So what? And that just is an immediate diffusion. But then the allowing it is shifting your mindset. Again, you're going to think I'm crazy, but it totally works to trick your nervous system, is allowing it and going, oh, here you are, anxiety. Oh, my worry about digestion. Here you are. And it's almost like you invite it. I know it sounds wild, but I swear to you, try it. Because when we fight anxiety, that effort traps us with the same force we put into trying to fight it. So when we run from it, it chases us with the same speed of our escape. So this is doing the opposite of that. We aren't running from it. We're actually sitting with it. And there's like a little drawing that he has in the book that I really like that's like this furry little anxiety ball. And it's like the person is just like, all right, come sit next to me. Like I guess we're doing this. And the beauty with that is what it does is it triggers your nervous system and your stress response to go, wait a minute. The person, like your brain is like, wait a minute, our person is not scared of this. Our person is reacting in a way that they are allowing this. So maybe we don't need to sound the alarms and the cortisol and the adrenaline and all these things. Like our person is okay with this. So maybe we're okay. So it help. This is how it scientifically and physiologically helps to soften and calm the stress response. So again, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but what Barry suggests is saying something like, I accept and allow this anxious feeling. And this is something that I have said to myself out loud, definitely in these moments. I have it, again, written on my phone in a little notepad, is you say it over and over to yourself. And you know in this moment, it's not like a magic switch. It's there's a buildup happening and you're trying to flatten the curve, you guys. That's amazing. So by saying this to yourself, it's not going to be an immediate switch, but you're just trying to dissipate things and it's going to take a little bit of time. So and Barry says, when you allow it and you do this correctly, this has a great healing effort on your nervous system, allowing it to desensitize from the anxious state you've been keeping it in. So you say to yourself, if it wants to make my throat tight, I'm going to let it make my throat tight. If my heart is going to pound, my heart is going to pound. Great. It's almost, and the next one you'll think is even more insane, it's almost like you're inviting it and welcoming it. Like, oh, can you step out from inside your mind and just kind of realize like, oh, there's the panicky feeling. Oh, there's the tingling at the base of my neck. Oh, here's where I get sweaty. Yeah. All right, sweatiness. Hey, how's it going? And it's almost being playful about what's happening to you. And I know in these moments, it's a challenge to do that. But I can tell you from my own experience that life, and especially right now, will give you many times to practice this. And the more that you do it, and even if you're faking it till you make it and you're just saying these things, you will notice the difference. It's like if you're going to go through this anyway, why not try these things that soften it, that over time it's like becomes your natural response. So here's another example of what you might say to yourself in this step 2 is you may say, I'm no longer going to battle with you, anxiety. I call a truce. Come closer to me now and sit down beside me. It's okay. I'm allowing you to stay. I accept and allow this anxious feeling. I accept and allow these anxious thoughts. So what you're doing is you're removing the resistance and allowing your body to freely vibrate with all this nervous energy that you feel in your body. And Barry says your fear of what anxiety might do to you is what has you stuck and trapped in anxiety. It's your fear of the fear that causes the whole problem. So you can be alert without being fearful, and you can allow the anxiety to exist. Okay, so number 3, the third step is run toward. Again, you're like, this is insanity, but running toward is actually kind of fun once you practice this and see results, because you know it works. At first, it feels like this is the opposite of what I want to be doing. I actually don't want to run toward this. But again, this is essential because this step is switching those alarm systems off. Because what happens in your brain is, again, the stress response center says, wait a minute, our person is not only allowing this, but they're asking for more. Like, okay, shut down all the stress because they want more. So there's like nothing threatening here. Our person is not threatened because they would never ask for more of what they actually feel threatened by. So again, it's like this tricky magic that you're doing to your brain. So in this step, you are running toward your anxiety by telling yourself you feel excited by your anxious thoughts or feelings. So this really helped shift things in my mind is when I started looking at anxiety as excitement. And so I would find myself, which often happens like when I'm out at dinner with usually like a large group of people where I feel like, oh, I don't know if I could leave and all these things, is if I start to feel the different sensations that I know after so many years of this are part of the anxiety, is I will tell myself, oh, I'm excited by this feeling. This is excitement. And it's neither positive nor negative. It's an excitement and it's an energy. And so I'm not labeling it as good or bad. And there's a way when I acknowledge it without labeling it either of those things, that then it just allows it to be there. So it's a reframe that you're doing is you say, I'm excited by this feeling. It's the excitement versus anxiety. So in essence, you're saying to your emotional brain, this is not a threat. I'm not worried about this. So this is another one of those fake it till you make it sort of things is maybe you don't believe it when you're saying it, but just say it and try it anyway. So remember, anxiety is just a wave of energy in your body, and it's one that you're trying to bob up and down with instead of being pummeled by. So Barry says this energy will not hurt you. It's the interpretation of this energy that causes the problem and traps you in the vicious cycle of fearing fear. So this number 3, run toward, is asking for more of it. So sometimes I'll even say, and he talks about it in the book, okay, what else you got? What else you got? Okay, so I've got chills, I've got the tingling down the neck, and I've got my stomach churning. What else? Maybe you could bring shortness of breath. You know, and it's like, what are you doing? You're a mad woman for asking for this. But it really does, like your body responds in a way that's like, oh, this is fun. I mean, you know, like let's just use fun lightly, but it definitely like trips up your system. And even though those things are the last things that you want, it definitely works. Okay, so step 4, the last step, is engage. So this step completes the whole movement from start to finish, and it keeps your anxious mind out of the way so your nervous system can desensitize and relax back down. So what you want to do is engage with something that takes your full attention. And Barry says this means that once you've diffused the initial fear and allowed anxiety to be present, you should then ride out the declining wave of anxiety by occupying yourself with an activity that really engages your mind. So this could be reading a magazine, focusing on a specific work task, having a phone call with a friend. The bottom line here is don't let your mind be idle, because it will go back and try to check in and like, well, how many other ways can we think about this? And what if this? And is it working? Is this technique working? And are you doing it the right way? Like our inner judge just wants to have a field day about it. So again, and just knowing, like, you know, don't get upset when your anxiety keeps trying to come back. It's inevitable that it will. So just gently place your attention back on the task that you are doing and know that you're doing your best to handle your anxiety in the right way that helps to calm your nervous system. Okay, so we've got D, which is diffuse. We've got A, which is allow. We've got R, which is run toward. And we've got E, which is engage. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to open up Barry's book and I'm going to read you a little section here of like a walkthrough of what that looks like. So if anybody has the book, it's on page 42. So he says, for example, imagine you're sitting at work and suddenly feel a wave of anxiety. Maybe your heart skips a beat or your mind fills with anxious thoughts. Number 1, you immediately respond by diffusing it with a playful, so what, whatever attitude. Number 2, then you move into allowing any residual anxiety you feel to be fully present. You get comfortable with your anxious discomfort. I accept and allow this anxious feeling. Number 3, now run toward the anxious feelings by telling yourself that you are in fact excited by them. You say to yourself, I'm excited by this feeling. Number 4, then finally, you move your focus back to what you were doing. In this case, you engage with the work in front of you without feeling a need to check in all the time because you know you're doing the right thing to heal your anxiety. I mean, that's pretty simple. And that's why I responded so quickly to it. I remember reading this book. My husband and I had like a date night at a fancy hotel a couple years ago. And, you know, we actually had time to read books uninterrupted. And he was probably reading something really heady. And I was reading like how to save myself from all of my neuroses. And I remember then after I read it, I was like, oh, I can't wait to have anxiety again. I can't wait. And so we were going to go somewhere for lunch that next day after we checked out. And normally I'd be like, I don't know, maybe let's go home. And I think I was going through an especially hard time with it with my digestion. And I was like, no, we're going out to lunch because I'm going to put this shit to the test. And immediately as we're driving there, I start to feel the anxiety. And I did the whole thing. And I was like, oh my God, this could make it so I could be in the world more easily. So I just cannot say enough good things about it. And this is where podcasts are lacking for me, because I would love to have a conversation with you guys. Like, so does this make sense? Do you have any questions? Is there any of this that feels like, well, that doesn't fucking make sense? Like, I would love to know where everybody's at. So because podcasts don't work that way, I have a Facebook page called the Adult Conversation Podcast Discussion Group. God, that couldn't be any longer. So if you're on Facebook, you can join our group, and I will be posting this, and maybe there'll be some conversation around it. I would love to hear how this works for you guys. I mean, I'm not thinking that this is like a fix for everything, of course. I'm just hoping that this can be a tool for people. It's been a huge tool in my life, and I just want to pass it along. So I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear how you're using it, if it's working, all of those sorts of things. So in addition to this 4-step DARE protocol that I use and the apps of his that I love, I also use an app called Headspace, which I really need to be spending more time on right now, that I really love. The only downside of that is the guy's voice on it. And I think at this point you can maybe change voices, but the guy who started it, who's really brilliant and amazing, his voice sounds like this YouTuber named Stampy Longnose that does Minecraft videos. So every time I listen to his meditations, I'm transported back to my son watching those YouTube videos. So that's a bit of a bummer. But anyway, I love that app. But one other thing is, maybe you've heard of the vagus nerve. Consider yourself lucky if you don't know what it is, because it means it hasn't been a problem for you. So short version is, this is the longest nerve in the body. It starts at the cranium and it goes through the digestive system and many organs. And this nerve is a major player in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest part, which is opposite of the fight or flight, which is what our the DARE protocol is trying to soften. So the vagus nerve is happiest when it is strong and toned. And so these are just a couple things that I know that help for me to calm this nerve and to make it happy. Singing. So I find myself, and maybe it's hard now, I usually in the car, this is something that I do, especially if I'm feeling anxious about going somewhere like big group gatherings or things like that, is I will put on some music and sing. And the so what's that? Kirtan music. It's so weird because I'm so not into some of that stuff, but then I so am into kirtan, which is like chanting, this yogic chanting. I feel amazing after that, but it doesn't have to be that. I also like to sing my lungs out to Adele, so many other things, some Stevie Wonder songs. I mean, there's just so many. So singing. So if you can, even if you go sit in your garage in your car and you sing, that's a way to tone and help the vagus nerve. Other ideas that they have is cold water on the face. So even dunking your face into like ice cubes. I refuse to ever do this because I'm always freezing, so I will never do that. But slow, deep breathing, which is what a lot of the meditation tells us to do. So those are ways to help calm your vagus nerve. You can also Google it and you'll find some other maybe more specific stuff. Something I did this morning that was just totally magic is I went to go put something in the mailbox. They were those Monopoly pieces that the grocery store gives you. My mom collects them, so I was sending them to her. While I was outside, it was just, the sun was so warm and beautiful, and so I'm in the front of my house, and I just went and got a lawn chair and sat there and just soaked it in, and it felt so good to be outside. I mean, I know it's so obvious. We're all trying to find these little moments of being in nature, but that I think filled me up for maybe all of today. So that was another thing that was really helpful. So in closing, here is the part with the optimism. So I am trying to believe right now that there is a gift, if not many gifts, in what's happening. And for some people, there will be cost for that. And we're all hoping that we're not part of that cost, but we know that some will be. But back to the optimism part is, there are so many things happening right now, and we're getting like this shuffle, this reshuffle of everything. I always talk about how we need to burn it down. And it's like, oh shit, maybe we shouldn't be asking to burn it down. But also, I see so many positive things that are likely to come out of this. And there's also some really devastating things too. So I'm not just looking at it through rose-colored glasses. But there are systems that are being exposed that need to be broken down. It appears having access to healthcare for everyone is important. Like, it's pretty amazing to see these political conversations happening where people who have been against socialism are now asking for it because a lot of the tenets of it are actually humane. So I'm grateful for some of that. I'm grateful that our earth gets to breathe a little bit and heal while we stop driving. It's also showing how making money in capitalism is so much more of a priority than how we treat human beings and our health. It's wild to think that there's so many people out there right now whose work is making them come in and like can't stop. And I get that people have to pay their bills and part of our system has to keep going. I mean, especially all the frontline people like the grocery store clerks and, teachers and mail people and the healthcare workers. Like I get that. And then there's this whole other machine that doesn't know how to stop yet, even in a time of great crisis. So I think we're starting to see why we need to reprioritize things. And I think there will be some good that comes out of that. On a personal note, we all have our own personal thing going on, things that we're losing, events we're having to cancel. And for me, it's, my book is coming out May 5th. I've worked my ass off for this, and it's been years in the making, and was supposed to come out. I intended for it to come out like a year and a half ago, and then it got postponed. So, and every time there's been a postponement, I've been grateful for it because in the end, it was like, oh, it's great that I had to wait this long because something better happened or I got another edit in it or something. And so even though if you take every month of my entire 43 years on this planet and you think out of all of these months, which would be the worst couple to have your book come out in, and it would be these, even though that feels like so unjust and is, and we all have these things right now that we're feeling like this is so unjust. I'm choosing to believe that there is some unseen gift here that I will hopefully be able to understand afterwards. So I'm just trying to trust that those gifts are there, whether it's the reshuffling of priorities. I mean, think about the look into family life that all of our spouses are getting, that the world is getting, employers are getting. I think that that's so beneficial. All the people, like I talked about before, the grocery store workers, healthcare workers, teachers, all these people who have pretty much been shit on by capitalism and our government in a lot of ways are like, we're realizing like when everything breaks down, what the most important pieces are. And it's all of these things that have never been given value. So I really think that there will be some good coming out of this. I just don't know how much we'll have to lose to get there. So with my own stuff, I'm just choosing to believe that there are gifts in here and the gifts of things burning to the ground. And I'm just trusting that they exist. And honestly, when I'm in my dark moments of life as we know it is going to be different from here on out, I think, yeah, but that's not only going to be bad. There's going to be so much growth from this. And I think a lot of more humane treatment so that if something like this were to happen again, that people don't lose everything if they can't work or be productive, which feels pretty enormous and could get a lot of people out of perpetual survival mode, especially the most vulnerable among us. So thank you guys for listening to this, and thank you for allowing me to do the thing that makes me feel calm and connected in a time of crisis, which is communicating, which is having this adult conversation, and which is reaching out to people and trying to help them. It's this funny thing that's like selfish at the same time as also being helpful. Is this fills my cup to be able to think that something that I offer people could be useful and could help give them relief from struggle. And so that fills me up knowing that I'm doing this. So again, this is like the last podcast. Like, was this for you or was this for me? Ideally, it's for both of us. So I'm happy with that. So the podcasts are going to keep going as scheduled. Every 2 weeks, I've got one on Monday coming out that I think is going to kind of blow your mind. And I had it all set and scheduled before this stuff went down, and it's actually quite perfect. And it's called The Unthinkable with Mary. And I know it sounds like it could be heavy, and there are a couple spots that are, but there's so much that crosses over, and she and I laugh so much. So let me just give you the teaser for it. Learn from the bravery and hard-earned wisdom of my guest and close friend Mary as she tells us all about how she handled the unimaginable, a cancer diagnosis for her son. Full disclosure, there are a few breakdown moments in here, but also we laugh so much, my God, especially at the beginning and then at the end when she reminds me of one of the funniest moments we had together. She's super laughy, like there's so much fun in there, so I don't want you to think it's like doom and gloom. And her take on things is just so apropos of this moment, like the unthinkable and things that had to shift in her life for the unthinkable that happened to her and how she came out of it, I just think could be such medicine for everybody right now. So we also talk about that one time she betrayed me, how her son's diagnosis completely changed the way I parent, and a Britney Spears moment we shared when we both lived in Santa Monica. Mary also talks about how her son's health emergency affected her marriage, which again may be apropos for what we're going through right now, which part of her life she had to completely put on hold, again, fitting, and her advice for any parent going through a medical crisis, and their friends who want to help but don't know what to say or do. Mary was a self-proclaimed crunchy mom before her son got sick, and she gets real about how she had to lose her crispiness in order to save her son. I know you are going to love her as much as I do. She offers so much. I really think you guys will enjoy the episode. Spoiler alert, no one dies, so I think your nervous system can handle it. I wouldn't do that to you guys. I'm sure I'll be back doing another episode on something that feels like the right thing to do with this whole crisis going on. So in the meantime, thank you guys so much for listening, and hang in there. We're all in this together, truly. And just a reminder, if you want to get Barry's book, it's called Dare, The New Way to End Anxiety and Stop Panic Attacks by Barry McDonagh, and the website is dareresponse.com. You can also find his app. He's also got support groups for specific sorts of anxieties. And yeah, as you know, his stuff's good.